It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Benvenuti a tutti. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. A lot of really good, fun stuff today in this episode. A little later on, myself and my friend Darrel, we are going to talk about electricity, at least a little bit of batteries, solar panels, electric cars, charging rates, stuff like that. So hopefully that helps provide some information on those subjects, because I am convinced that the electrification of cars, or at least partial with cars that have an engine and a motor in them at the same time, like the RAV4 that we recently got, this is the future of driving, and it's going to happen pretty quick. Now that we've kind of gotten some momentum going, I would not be surprised as soon as 5, maybe 10 years, but 80% to 100% of all new cars will have some ability, even if it's limited, to charge or be 100% electric. So it might be something that you just take a few minutes to familiarize yourself with and understanding how these vehicles work, the pros and the cons. And of course, I think the pros outweigh the cons, but there are some downsides and limitations. So we're going to talk about that with Darrel later, that and solar panels. So I hope you find that very educational. Also in this show, 2 segments coming up on rebalancing. And there's a little bit of overlap, and I'm kind of annoyed with that. But the 2 segments were, inspired by 2 different things that happened. So I ended up recording them, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do this topic, why not put both of these segments in? So if it gets a little bit redundant, my apologies, but maybe it helps the message sink in. So one of them is in reference to rebalancing, again, as a concept and why you should do it and when you should do it. And I specifically talk about large cap growth versus small cap value, because the returns have changed wildly in 6 months, and how that works, and the thought process behind some of that as a concept. The other segment in this episode is a rebalancing of a specific portfolio. So one segment is very generic, with a little bit of talking about U.S. market segments. The other one is more specific, and I do kind of a walkthrough of me rebalancing an actual existing client's account and what my thought process is when I'm doing that. And maybe that helps you figure out if you're doing rebalancing, say you're getting a year closer to retirement, or maybe you're in retirement, or maybe you just want to be slightly more conservative for whatever reason. Fine. You can listen to that and maybe get some ideas of how to look at and how to utilize the granularity and the clarity that my system provides, because you can very easily see exactly what you own in what percentages and calculate it out, and you can make a plan and you can follow your plan. And that often is not you can't do it if you just have a handful, whether it's 5 or 10 random mutual funds, because you would have to go and dig in each mutual fund and figure out what they're doing before you could even make an intelligent adjustment, because they're all over the board. Sometimes some managed fund might be called aggressive stock growth, and it allows the manager to have up to 20% bonds if he wants to. Well, what does he have right now? Is it 20% bonds? Is it 10? Is it 5? And a lot of that is eliminated in the way that I do the investing. So hopefully those things help you as well. And before we get into that stuff here, just one more quick thing. From the mailbag, I have an email. There's no bag involved. Why? From the mail system, whatever, an email from a client, not a client, a listener. And actually, I got quite a few emails, maybe 8 to 9 emails on this same subject. An episode or two ago, I did a segment called How to Unfuck Your Portfolio. And I have gotten all these emails, which are delightful. And I picked one to read some lines from just to give you an idea of what people are telling me. And so this is from a listener, initials CL. So hopefully they know who they are. Quote, I look forward to your show every time it comes out. I fucked up my portfolio during COVID. I pulled out when the market was dropping with the plan on putting a certain percent back in at different levels of loss from the market highs. Now, the unfortunate thing that happened to them is that they're pulling money as the market goes down, waiting for it to go down a whole bunch more, and then it didn't. And I'll continue here with some more content from their email. I couldn't imagine a market that would continue to climb when everything was shut down. I never set a plan for if we never dropped to my goal, so I continued waiting for my chance to get back in. A year later, I've missed out on so much, and I'm afraid of getting back in at all-time highs, end quote. And so this is exactly what I was talking about in that segment of how to unfuck your portfolio. And I'm not going to repeat everything that was in there because you can go fucking listen to the unfucking of your portfolio. So, but the basic idea is that you want to have a long-term plan. You want to have a strategy. My plans, my ideas, my strategies may not be the right thing for you. I present ideas, of course, never personalized investment advice on the show, but you can get ideas from that, create your own plan, put it in writing. What is it you're doing and why are you doing it? You can change your plan. You can modify your plan. You can rebalance back to the plan. There's all kinds of things. And one of the things that you want to do, and I will often tell clients this, and maybe trying to be a little cheeky about it, which kind of my thing, but I don't really give a shit about your portfolio. Now, let me explain. I don't care about your portfolio in the way that you should care about your portfolio because it's your freaking money. And one of the benefits this allows me to do is I can look at your portfolio because it's just numbers. It's just dollars, right? And I can rebalance it to the plan that I created with that specific client and rebalance it. And I don't really think about it. I don't struggle emotionally. That's the key. I'm hopefully more rational. Of course, we all have emotional different problems with our thinking, but I'm hoping I can be a little bit more rational because it's not my money. It's your money. And I'm thinking about the goal that we set for you as an individual client. So it might be a little easier for me to do that for some people than doing it on your own. But the thing you want to really try to avoid doing is what this email is talking about, is reacting to something that's going on today. And this is a perfect example of why that can be so problematic, is that if the market drops 20, 25% and you take a bunch of your money out and then it rebounds like it did, not always going to do that. This is the problem, is you don't know. You don't know when it's going to bottom out. You don't know when the peak was, when you should have sold it when it was high. So with timing the market, not only do you have to be right, you have to be right twice. And of course, not only do you have to be right twice, but you have to be right big enough, I guess, with enough of an adjustment that it's worth the time, the effort, the mental anguish, the possible transaction costs, and the possible tax consequences that you might create by selling at the peak and then buying back at the bottom. And the problem, of course, is that when things are going great, who wants to sell? It's hard to take money off the table when you're winning. And of course, it's hard to throw money in after the market's gone down 25 or 30% because you might think, what if it goes down 50? This is why we generally want to avoid any kind of market timing. Market adjustments are allowed. Plan adjustments are allowed. Rebalancing is allowed. We're not doing this completely blind, but We want to have a reason for what we're doing. Anyway, thank you, CL, for the kind email. And we're going to take a quick break and talk about rebalancing a couple different ways. And then we're going to talk about electric cars and solar panels with my good friend, Darrel. So stay there, and we'll be right back. At this point in time, I feel I'm compelled to do a little bit more about rebalancing, not in relationship to a specific portfolio, but again, conceptually, why the process of rebalancing. And of course, I think it creates a systemic process for selling high and buying low. Regular listeners know that over the last 3, 5, maybe even 10 years, large cap stocks, particularly large cap growth stocks, have done really well. And you've heard me once a year, sometimes twice a year, make little tweaks to the amount of the portfolio that should be in which position, which part. And I've expressed concern that large cap growth in particular has gotten carried away. And sometimes I would take money out of that bucket and put it a little bit more in small cap or a little bit more in value. And sometimes when you do that, you can have a process where for a couple of years, you are lagging the market. In this case, you're lagging the U.S. market because the big winners keep being large cap growth, but you just took 2% out of it and put it somewhere else, or you took 3% out of it or 5% out of it and put it somewhere else. And now for my clients, and I'm going to probably go over this next episode, what my current thoughts are on these allocations. You get a period in time where things switch, things change. And someone once asked me, they said, well, why don't you make those adjustments after you know things are going to change? Well, because sometimes by the time you know that it's going to change, it already did. And now you're kind of late to the game of making these final tweaks and adjustments. So I don't normally do this, but I want to talk to you about some 6-month returns in the U.S. stock market because this so beautifully shows what can happen in an extreme example. This is not normal. Normal years, maybe there's no such thing as a normal year. In normal years, the difference between large cap growth and large cap value and their returns is small. The difference between mid cap growth and value, small cap and growth and value, these differences are small. But we look for them and we can make very small adjustments. Like I said, 8% here, 8% there. Well, for a couple of years, I've been moving away from large cap growth. And for a couple of years, it's resulted in slightly lower returns in the portion of the portfolio that's in the U.S. stock market. We still made a lot. It's fine. It's not a big deal. But I like to try to mitigate volatility and risk where I can and follow a slightly contrarian view and put money where it hasn't done as well when you look at entire markets or entire market segments. I have no reason to think that this works for individual stocks. So going out and buying stocks that fell and selling the stocks that won may or may not be a good process. I don't know. I have not done the research on it. But with large segments of the U.S. stock market with index funds where you know exactly what you have and you can see the granularity. So you have the clarity and the granularity to make adjustments. So what I wanted to point out here is over the last 6 months, the S&P 500 growth, the large cap growth part of the U.S. market in the last 6 months is up 5%. It's fine. 6-month return of 5%. The small cap value fund, I'm just going to pick this one because it's the best, in the last 6 months is up 48 fucking percent. 48% in 6 months. That is the part of the U.S. market, small cap value, that has been doing the worst. Still positive over the last several years, but way behind large cap growth. Maybe 5% per year over the last 10 years versus 14% per year for large cap growth. That's why I wanted more money there than the default or the market neutral position. And now it has paid off. And I'm very relieved because it's nice every once in a while to get something right. It's not a case of me forgetting the book title of book number 4, Common Sense on Mutual Funds, by the way. But it's an example where in a very short period of time, 6 months, things switched dramatically. And so if you're balancing your portfolio once a year, which is my general recommendation, because normally this doesn't happen. Now you get to a point where you look at it and you go, oh, wow, there was a huge change. And if you had been adjusting a few percent every year for the last 3 or 4 years, now you were in the right place at the right time. I don't always get this right. As an example, I talked about not having long-term bonds last year that made 20% in a bond because of my concern that interest rates are going to go up and you're going to lose a whole bunch of money at some point in U.S. high-quality long-term bonds. But here's a case where the last 6 months, large cap growth made 5, small cap value made 48 in 6 months. And so things can switch, which is why you diversify. This is why you balance. This is why you rebalance. This might be why you do what I call overbalancing, where just a few percent goes away from the winner into something that's lagging. Again, I have no reason to believe that this works for managed mutual funds or for individual stock picking. This concept is very specific to having the index funds and the large market segments of the index for the United States. Might work a little bit in international, but the U.S., it works really well, and there's a lot of data to support it. So just a follow-up thought on rebalancing and how it can work sometimes when you least expect it.
And they told me the story all about this guy named Lehi who lived in Jerusalem in 600 BC. Now, apparently, in Jerusalem in 600 BC, everyone was completely bad and evil, every single one of them, man, woman, child, infant, fetus. And God came to Lehi and said to him, "Put your family on a boat and I will lead you out of here." And God did lead them. He led them to America. I said, America? From Jerusalem to America by boat in 600 BC? And they said, yes. Then they told me how Lehi and his descendants reproduced, and over the course of 600 years, there were 2 great races of them, the Nephites and the Lamanites. And the Nephites were totally, totally good, each and every one of them, and the Lamanites were totally bad and evil, every single one of them, just bad to the bone. Then, after Jesus died on the cross for our sins, on his way up to heaven, he stopped by America and visited the Nephites. And he told them that if they all remained totally, totally good, each and every one of them, they would win the war against the evil Lamanites. But apparently somebody blew it, because the Lamanites were able to kill all the Nephites. All but one guy, this guy named Mormon, who managed to survive by hiding in the woods. And he made sure this whole story was written down in reformed Egyptian hieroglyphics chiseled onto gold plates, which he then buried near Palmyra, New York. Well, I was just on the edge of my seat. I said, "What happened to the Lamanites?" And they said, "Well, they became our Native Americans here in the U.S." And I said, "So you believe the Native Americans are descended from a people who were totally evil?" And they said, "Yes." Then they told me how this guy named Joseph Smith found those buried gold plates right in his backyard. And he also found this magic stone back there that he put into his hat and then buried his face into. And this allowed him to translate the gold plates from the Reformed Egyptian into English. Well, at this point, I just wanted to give these 2 boys some advice about their pitch. I wanted to say, okay, don't start with this story. I mean, even the Scientologists know to start with a personality test before they start telling people all about Xenu, the evil intergalactic overlord.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
I'm going to take a few minutes here and talk about rebalancing. I talk about it all the time, but I don't know that I really give details on how one does it. And maybe You don't need these details. You get it. But I just kind of wanted to do a little bit of a summary and then a specific account walkthrough. So last summer, end of summer, late summer, I did 6 episodes in a row that had the Polaris Plan Part 1 through 6. So if you've not heard that, you may want to pause and go look for those. I think it shows 351 through 356. I'm pretty sure. And then in show 369, I did a tweak on my international recommendations. So this kind of goes forward, assuming you understand this process and that you know all those details, if that is something of interest to you. And I'm going to talk about a generic account, I guess. It's actually it's a real person's account, but we're not talking about them or their name. I'm just going to walk you through what I'm doing with it right now as part of my job. So this is someone who is about to retire. We're talking like within months, and then start taking money out in next calendar year, 2022. So I want to have everything all set. And of course, we were pretty much all set already because the cushion grows every year. And one of the key points to my philosophy, strategy, system, the Polaris Plan, is to gradually grow the cushion. And while I can easily measure the percentage of the money in the cushion, the thing for me that's really important is how long the cushion will last. I've talked about this in greater detail in other episodes, so I'll just quickly cover it here. This is someone who has a bit over 1.3 million, and so they could take out 66,000 a year using the 5% rule, which is usually for people 62 and older. If you retire earlier than that, you might really want to start with 4% for a few years to make sure everything goes your way and works out. And of course, if you tell me, well, 4% is not enough for me to retire, well, then maybe you're not quite ready. It may be a little too close to the edge. It doesn't mean you have to keep whatever job you want to get away from. If it's very stressful, do something else for less pay. Just don't take money out of the portfolio or as much out of the portfolio. So kind of a hybrid thing where you're kind of retired, but kind of not retired. Anyway, I digress, as I normally do. But in this case, the person only needs about 60,000 a year. And that's important because they could take out about 65 or 66, but they think they only need 60, which is great. That gives us more room. The smaller amount you need out of the portfolio, the easier, of course, any and all of this is, because if you have a pension and Social Security and a spouse with income or a rental property, not that I'm suggesting you go buy a rental property, but if you have alternate sources of income or the ability to work, the smaller amount you can take out of your portfolio, the more risk you could take. But in this case, we're talking about something pretty normal where they're going to want to take about 60,000 per year. And so the cushion, how long will the cushion last? That's the thing that I'm looking for. And here we have a situation where with this adjustment, it will be pretty close to 12 to 13 years. So right now, 12 to 14, 13 to 15 is kind of the target range I have for the average person. If you're more conservative, the cushion can be a little bigger. If you're more aggressive, where you can stay at your job or work part-time or have some way to avoid taking out money, you can take more risks. So all of that being said, for me, like I said, the critical thing about the cushion is how long it will last, not how many dollars are in it, not what percentage of your portfolio it is. And the reason for the cushion is to have a generous portion of your portfolio at retirement in stuff that is relatively to quite conservative. You want the bulk of your money, if you can handle it, if you can manage it, in stocks still, even at retirement. Now, the question is, what do you mean by bulk? So, for my parents, even at the time of their death at the age of 81, they had 90% of their portfolio in stocks because my dad had 3 different pensions, 2 of them very small. They lived a very modest life, way below their means. They were probably taking out 2.5% to 3% of their portfolio, even in their 70s, and they could have taken out considerably more. So they didn't need a whole lot in the cushion. So I'm going to walk through this. Okay, roughly $1.3 million portfolio. And it has, I don't know, about, what is the current thing here? I've adjusted it to $480,000 roughly in the cushion, and that works out to about 35.5% of the portfolio. Again, the percentage number, I'm just giving it to you because it's so fucking easy to calculate. Excel does it for me, of course, but it's a nice thing to know. It gives you a reference point. When people push me to give just a fixed number, I go with 40% in a cushion, although for some people that's way too much in a cushion and you're missing out on future growth opportunities. But it depends. The right amount might be something close to half of your portfolio for you, depending on the details. So we have the 6 different bond funds that I'm currently using, again, discussed last summer. I have the 6 different stock funds for the United States, large cap growth and value, mid cap growth and value, small cap growth and value, again, previously discussed, a REIT fund, and then 6 different funds to spread out the international portion so we can make these adjustments we can granularly, we can go in with a scalpel and decide what to sell and what to add to and how to rebalance. If you just have a target date fund, you cannot do any of this at all. If you use something like the 3-legged stool with the total U.S. market, the total international market, and the total bond market, it's phenomenally easy, but you lose some of this ability to go in and very carefully select. And of course, all of this requires, like I talked about a few weeks ago, how to unfuck your portfolio. You need a plan. You need to follow that plan. You can change the plan whenever you want, but you have to have a plan so you're not just winging it. You can do this all with paper and pencil. I have a big fancy schmancy spreadsheet that I've made over the years because it does get complicated. So in this case, the person is going to retire and start taking money out in 2022. So I looked at all the investments they have, where they are relative to my general plan that I have in mind, and then more specifically, their plan, which may be in some small variance to the general plan idea because of their personal situation. And I look at this and I say, okay, I want them to have just a little bit more in the cushion. Well, how do I get more in the cushion? Obviously, I have to take it from somewhere else. So one of the things that I'll look at is that the percentage of all stocks that are in the REIT fund. It was about 8% because REITs have been underperforming. So I wanted to beef that up a little bit. Their international is currently 29%. And so that looked pretty good. I didn't really need to change that. It's 20% of all stocks are international. And that is providing a little bit of stabilization, not as much as it used to, because sometimes international goes up or down when the U.S. stock market does the opposite or in a different degree. So it reduces overall volatility without really a material change in the long-term returns. International stocks, REITs, and U.S. stocks all make about 10% in the really long run, 15, 20 years out. So what were the things that have gotten out of whack, that have done better than I expected? Well, the first thing is VSIAX, the Vanguard Small Cap Value Fund. The last 6 months of last year, the last 8 months of 2020, and even into 2021, has just crushed it. Now, for most people, doing this once a year is fine. For this person, we might make smaller tweaks. Another one in 3 months or another one in 6 months, but I might not. And those really small adjustments for you may not be worth the time. For me, this is my job and I love doing this, and I have a great big complicated spreadsheet that helps me figure out what to adjust. So it's kind of cool. So in this situation, I am going to sell $35,000 of the small cap value fund. The bulk of their money is inside of an IRA. And this is one of the investments. Actually, the 3 things that I'm going to reduce are inside of the IRA. So no tax consequences are created by this rebalancing, this adjustment. So I'm selling $35,000 of the Vanguard Small Cap Index. I'm selling $6,000 of the Small Cap Growth, and then $21,000 of the mid-cap value fund. So you can see it's all small cap and it's almost all value because recently those allocations got a little out of whack, a little too high for what I really wanted. You don't have to be this precise with it. Again, like I said, this is something I do for fun. I added $10,000 to the REIT position, not a big change. I added $4,000 to the mid-cap growth and $7,000 to the large cap growth, just because in this portfolio, they were, again, in variance from my target estimates, what I want them to have as a percentage in each position. And so with those couple of sells and couple of buys, I still have, and the thing I was really focusing on here, is $41,000 more. I am going to allow $3,000 to stay behind as cash in this account. And I'm going to add $10,000 to the short-term U.S. government bond fund from Vanguard. That's VBIRX. I'm adding $12,000 to the short-term corporate bond fund, VFSUX. And $16,000 to the Jennie Mae fund, VFIJX, just because those are the ideal, or it gets me closer to the ideal ratios I want for the bond funds in relationship to each other. And we'll also have sufficient cash on hand inside of the IRA, more than $20,000, which in this case will provide 3 to 4 months of cash on hand for the client, for the investor, for you, if you're following and listening and playing along with this little game. Of course, the amount of cash on hand can be totally different. You could have it stay close to 1%, or maybe the amount you need to take out every month. In this case, $60,000 a year, about $5,000 a month. I like it to be a little bit bigger, but again, if you have $100,000 of cash or CDs at your local bank, you can trim the cash here to adjust for it, so you can get slightly better bond returns in this portfolio. But for me, this is going to be set up. We're probably going to do about $5,000 per month being pulled out next year, and I want this to be ready. And in this case, the bonds are pretty pathetic, really. I mean, we're talking about an average yield of 1.1%, and that includes the international bonds, the emerging market bonds, and the high yield bonds, which are only a small part of the bond portfolio. Again, this is the part of the portfolio that I call a cushion. It's not meant to make a whole lot of money. It's meant to protect you so that the stocks can make a whole lot of money. And in case the stocks go down, you could actually pull out more from the cushion and wait years and years and years for the stock market to come back. So in this situation, there is $480,000 roughly in the cushion in all bond and cash positions. If someone were to take out $60,000 per year, again, for this client, they need about $60,000, want about $60,000 per year. Of course, you could do $60,000 times 10 is 600. This is not 10 years, right? It's 2 years less. It's like 6 times 8 is 480,000. Okay, we're in that ballpark. So you think, Phil, well, this I could only take out money from the bonds for 8 years, and then I'm going to run out of money. The cushion is only 8 years long. You're forgetting about the stock dividends. Stock dividends now are pretty low compared to the historical norms. And a portfolio like I might create, the current dividend rate from stocks is about 1.7%, under 2%. It was probably closer to 2% last year, but it is $15,000. So you don't need to sell $60,000 in bonds if you're getting $15,000 in dividends. You get $15,000. You might have to sell $45,000 in bonds, which, hey, now you're talking about 10, maybe 11 years of being able to pull out money from the bonds and still not selling any stocks. You can make adjustments annually, rebalance. You can overbalance. You can do whatever you think you need to do with the stocks, but you don't have to sell them per se to create your cash flow, because the bonds are paying dividends of about $5,000 a year. Not a lot. I get it. So $5,000 in dividends from the bonds, $15,000 in dividends from the stocks. So you're talking about $20,000. So you only need to now sell about $40,000 from the portfolio. So again, if it's 480, you're looking, give or take, 12 plus years where you can do this. So that's just some thoughts where if you know what your plan is, you have it in writing, you follow it, you take your understanding of long-term markets, you read all the books that I recommend, and you create a plan, you write it down, you create a spreadsheet, whatever you got to do. And then once a year, and if it's over $1 million, okay, twice a year if you want. It doesn't mean you actually change anything. You could look at it. But you have a plan. You adjust to that plan. If you get to a year, unlike the last year, last 2 years, last 12 years, where the market is not up, if the market is down 30% by the next time you look at this, you might want to do a rebalance within stocks, but you probably aren't going to sell any stocks. And so you're going to have the cash and dividends from the stocks and the bonds, plus maybe you sell a little bit of bonds. And you can do that for several years while you wait for the stock market to recover. So that's kind of how this works. I hope this makes sense. I hope this is helpful to give you an idea of the thought process that I go through. If you think this is awful and it confused you, let me know. Send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. If, on the other hand, you think you knew enough from the other shows to get it and you like this, you can also let me know. And maybe in a few months, I'll do another one of these kind of like in real time as I'm adjusting an actual client's portfolio, so you can kind of get a real world example of how this might work. And again, you have to take into account a lot of different things about you and your positions and all that stuff. But from a long-term perspective, you really want to try to take emotion out of all this. Because if you, like me, were very, very sad 4 years ago when Trump got elected, and not only was I sad because he got elected, but because so many people voted for him, which they did again, thankfully. Oh my God, he lost. But if at that point in time you had taken all of your money out of the stock market, you would have missed a whole lot of opportunity. We've made a whole lot of money in the last 4 years, not because of Trump, just because that's kind of how this shit works. We made money under Obama, et cetera, all the way back. So the general bias, most years, the stock market goes up. So trying to guess when might be a peak and to get out, and then to guess when to get back in, and taking into account any tax consequences, the probability, the numbers, the historical data says that you're probably more likely to fuck it up than to do it correctly. So buy and hold, rebalance once a year, have a written plan, understand why you have that plan, tweak your plan if you want to, but fucking follow it and don't go on emotion. Your life's going to be so much more chill. And it's something that I have an easier time doing for my clients because it's not my money. I have a system. I'm not that worried about them losing money because I have a system and it's not my money. My money is more important to me. And I have learned over the years, one of the best things I've ever done for myself is to follow my own fucking advice. Because way back years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago, there were a couple of occasions where I thought I knew something even more better than what I'm telling the public. And I would try some things and it almost every time didn't work out. And so once I actually gave up trying to really beat the market and just doing what my plan says for myself, the better I did. You can make a fortune earning just 7 to 10% a year if you have time and save enough money. Anyway, I digress. So this is a rebalancing specific example. Let me know what you thought. I appreciate it. And this wraps up this little segment on how to rebalance your portfolio.
I'm not worried about dying because I'm an atheist, right? Now, I know that this is a Christian country and I stand up for your right to be religious, but please know that you're wrong, right? Please know that you're living in a fantasy land and that after you die, nothing happens. Stop being a fucking child. I'm not scared of dying because I'm an atheist. I know I'll just rot in the ground. Right? I won't even know I'm dead. Do you want to know why? Because I'll be fucking dead. Religious people worry because they believe in heaven. If there's a heaven, there has to be a hell. And everyone who's read that book knows that you've done enough shit to go to hell, right? And that makes it very stressful on your deathbed, doesn't it? No one want to prick you out going, oh, this isn't going to be good. Hey? I don't want to go to heaven. I don't even want the option of heaven. I don't want to exist in a conscious state for the rest of eternity constantly thinking. I don't like thinking as it is. Where's me passport? Can't punch women in the face. The Bible calls heaven eternal bliss. I don't care how blissful it is. It's eternal. You'll get used to it, and then you'll be fucking bored. And what's hell meant to be like? Fire and brimstone and eternal agony? That's what's written in the Bible. That's God's book. As far as I know, the devil hasn't brought out a book. We don't know his side of the argument, right? If you ask me, the devil and God are having an argument. The devil's being a bigger fucking man. Because God's just writing shit about him. And the devil's going, I'm not even going to fucking comment, son, if you talk about me like that.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investment should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship. Up next, I have my good friend Darrel Henschell. How are you, sir?
Oh, very good, thanks.
How's that for a quick interview? You used to be one of two, maybe even the runner for a while of a free thought group in Arkansas, right?
Yeah, Fayetteville Free Thinkers. Me and Doug, the co-founders of it.
Yeah,
and in retirement somewhat, but
yeah, taking a little break. And Doug's running it still.
Yeah, up until the pandemic, they were having regular meetings, but yeah, it's still got the website going, and still, I'm sure you'll start meetings up again here when we can.
Yeah, that's great, because I found myself many years ago kind of stuck working for the man in Bentonville, Arkansas, and found your little group and instantly got a whole bunch of friends, and I still yearn for those days coming in and visiting you guys and hanging out. That was good fun.
Yeah, good times.
I still remember Michael doing a presentation on Tiktaalik.
On what?
Tiktaalik, the transitional fossil between fish and mammal.
Yep.
That was the first
that walked.
Yeah, it was the first time I heard of it. I mean, it was pretty new then, but I was like, what? And then, of course, I bought the book about it, and it absolutely... I mean, and it's not even what we intended to talk about, but it's a perfect example of how you can use historical data about global climate, plate tectonics, geology, and evolution all come together. If any one of those pieces was wrong, they would not have found the fossil where they found the fossil. It's just mind-blowing.
Looking for it. Yeah.
Just for fun, you tune pianos for a living.
Yes, I do.
That's nice. And anyone who follows you on Facebook knows that you are also a big fan of goats.
Oh, yes. Goats are good people in general, I find.
and of course, I've had the luxury over the years of being at your house a couple of times. Thank you for having me, of course.
Oh, yeah.
And going out and seeing the goats. And just the little ones are so damn cute. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I like to come home from work like I did tonight, and I go out there, and they're yelling at me. They want to go out in the backyard, so I open the door, and they run, and they kick their feet in the air and jump around. They get their freedom on the back 2 acres. Dark.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah,
it's one of those things
that pure joy.
There's a little bit of farmer in me, but it's really small.
Yeah, mine is too.
So I'd like to think about that. But one of the main reasons we wanted to talk today is that between the two of us, we might be able to have one intelligent conversation about some topics on cars that are electric or plug-in hybrid electric and solar panels, because you actually installed all your own solar panels. Is that correct?
Well, I hired a local fella to do it.
Okay.
So yeah, I didn't do it personally, no.
And so I have a solar panel. I can't call it a solar system because people think I'm talking about the sun and the earth and Jupiter.
Yeah, I know. That always sounds funny.
Yeah, so I always have to say the solar panels. And we can talk and compare and contrast and how you're doing on that and how I'm doing it. And maybe some listeners will get some ideas, and maybe we can knock down some false information, fake news. I don't misinformation, I guess, about how that stuff works.
Yep, sure can.
How did you get started with solar panels? Walk me through that.
Well, I had been looking at it for some time, and 15 years ago, it didn't make necessarily fiscal sense to do it because it was considerably more expensive 15 years ago.
Right.
Other than, I think, about 10 years ago when we had the crash, there were some subsidies that came through. But it was about 5-6 years ago, and it was getting considerably less than $1 per watt. I forget if that's wholesale. And it was just starting to make sense. And I've wanted to have it for decades. I'd be driving out and seeing the sun and go, oh, I wish I had some solar panels catching this. So when the price got reasonable, and it just keeps getting more reasonable all the time, I couldn't resist.
Now, you didn't put it all in at once, did you? You went in stages?
Well, so I had this. We bought this property in 2007, and we had this wonderful shop in the back with this nice southern open facing roof that's been sitting there for 50 years, getting hot in the sun, doing nothing. So I tried to match what we use, which I think is what you want with net meter. They're not going to typically buy it back at much of a price anyways. So I put in about a 9K system. And then a year later, I added another 10 panels, adding about another 3K, because I had the room there on the roof. And I was going to tell you that actually, when you put in as much as you can, because after a while, if you had any room left, you'll be like, "Well, I want to add more." and if the wife ends up getting an EV, and I have the plug-in hybrid now, but my next car will be all EV, I'll probably want to add some more.
Yeah, I do already know that feeling of mine's only been in 4 months. You threw out some big numbers there, a 9 kilo something. What does that mean?
Okay, so I got 31 panels on my first setup, and they are 290 watts. So you add that up, and it was 8.9 kilowatt system. So 8,900 watt system.
And so that means, theoretically, under perfect conditions, facing straight towards the sun at noon, in maybe even in the equator, I don't know if they adjust those for your latitude, but that system could generate continuously 8,900 watts, which would be 89 100-watt bulbs being powered all at the same time?
Yes. I guess that's what that would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, not 80.
Yeah.
Divided by 100.
And so the two tricky things is, one is the flow, the amount of energy moving at a given time, power, I think they call that, and that's measured in kilowatts, and then the amount of energy created over a period of time, like a day, is measured in kilowatt hours.
Right.
How's
so
that
if you
sound?
make 8.9K for an hour, you've got 8.9 kilowatt hours.
Excellent. And that kind of plays into car batteries, because I know that you own a Prius Prime, and I also own, for a few more weeks now, a Prius Prime. And the battery pack in that thing is about, what do you think, 7 kilowatt hours, 8 kilowatt hours?
It's 8.8.
8.8. My RAV4, by the way, you know what they did for the batteries in there?
It's two of those.
Yeah. It's literally two of the Prius Prime batteries, because they didn't want to take the time and effort and the engineering costs to figure out how to make a custom.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty clever. So it's exactly to Prius Prime. Yeah.
You know, a fun fact about that I just learned today, because I was online and all these people are complaining about mining of lithium and da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
We can't. Do you know how much lithium you have in your Prius Prime? So it's a 8.8K battery. It uses only the middle 60%. It weighs about 250 pounds, the whole thing altogether.
I would guess it has enough lithium to make a ball about the size of a football.
Well, I know what I looked up was the weight. Maybe it's pretty light. I don't know about the physical size.
5 kilograms? 5 pounds? 2 pounds?
No, more like 1.
1 pound.
Well, so the Tesla 70 kilowatt battery has 12 kilograms. So you take that by
2.2.
So we're about 10% of that.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it's under 2 pounds. And you know what lithium costs? The wholesale price? I looked that up.
It's not expensive.
It's like it's $3 or $4 a pound.
Yeah.
So we've got like $5 worth of lithium in our car.
Well,
and my car is going to save me about 10,000 gallons of gas over the life of the vehicle from burning 10,000 gallons of gas.
Wow, that's amazing.
And that little 2 pounds of lithium, we'll recycle it and get it back and use it again.
That's the thing that is amazing, because people will ask me, they'll say, well, what happens to the battery when your car dies? And I'll say, what happens to the combustion engine when your car dies? And they're like, what? And I go, no, really, it goes and it sits in a junkyard waiting for someone to buy it. And once it sits there long enough, it's not worth anything other than scrap metal. And eventually someone goes and harvests it and sells it for scrap metal. And the battery can actually, after it's no longer useful in a car, be used as backup energy in someone's house and kind of refurbished.
Yep.
Or, like you said, if it's just not working anymore, they can process and take a good chunk of the material out and use it over.
Yep. Just like the lead acid ones that are 150 years old. When you buy a battery, you're supposed to bring in your old one because they don't want people with the toxic acid, and lead is toxic too.
Yeah.
They don't want that out in the community, and it's all recycled. We've been doing that for more than a century.
That's true. There's that regular starter battery. Have you replaced your starter battery yet? You just did, didn't you?
Well, you're thinking of my old Prius, the one I sold.
No. What model year is your Prius Prime?
2018.
Okay, just so you know.
Yeah.
And all of our Priuses over the years, we've had to replace the starter battery, the little accessory battery, every 3 to 4 years.
Good heavens! The one I did it in my old one. It was an 04, but I think it went 10 years. I think it had the original.
Yeah, we had the first ones that we got. We actually had an 05 and an 06 Prius, and I think we went like 5 or 6 years, and then left on like the dome light for 30 minutes, and the car wouldn't start. And a lot of people don't know that a lot of hybrids, even though they have these big batteries, still have a little accessory / starter battery that tells the computer to start the car. So I've not, the first ones we had, we got something like that, but then I just kind of got in the habit of replacing the battery every 4 years because I don't want to be stranded.
Well, you can jump them just like a regular car.
You can
jump people.
You can. And matter of fact, we bought some of those little portable jumpers, little battery packs that you can put in your car.
Yep.
And that'll start.
I have one.
That'll start a Prius.
I've seen
easy.
Oh yeah, I've seen people, and they need to make this a standard built-in thing on these EVs and plug-in hybrids, where I can hook up. And so if we have an ice storm and the power goes down, if my car's charged up, I can hook up to my 12-volt battery and let it sit there in running mode, I guess, and use it as a generator to run a refrigerator, because I have a 2,000-watt inverter that'll convert to AC, and you can use your car as a home generator.
I have seen people do that. I've not yet tried that, but I know it's just some math and calculations and electrons, and it's not rocket science. One can learn it, but that's kind of a more advanced topic. And so you have this car, and you're not even paying really for the electricity other than you bought the panels, right? You're not charging off the grid?
Right. Well, I'm grid tie like you, so net meter. And so we went into winter 1,500 kilowatt hours in the plus, and then January, maybe February, was kind of slow with the clouds and the weather.
Yeah.
So now at this moment, I'm 500 kilowatt hours in the hole, but that's about 1% difference.
Wow. And do you have an annual
of what?
An annual date where they clear it out and zero you out?
No. I'm on a 20-year contract, and whatever it is, if I went in the hole more than this, I would have to, I don't know, pay $80 or something to make up the difference.
Everyone's electric company has different rules. So this is something, listeners,
Yes.
if you're thinking about solar, you got to understand the system that you're in. For mine, in New Lenox, I'm using a company called Commonwealth Edison, very big in Illinois. And they allow net metering, but you cannot install, I think it was more than 110% of what you used in the previous year. And the idea is they do not want you to become an energy producer. You're supposed to only offset what you're using, not because if you produce more than 110%, you have to register as an energy producer, and then there's different rates, lower rates, by the way, that you might get. And I put in a system that theoretically will only provide 65% of the power that I use. And then I went about figuring out how to cut my electricity usage maybe by 10%. And then I also, not only do I have net metering, and so correct me here if I'm wrong, but net metering, if it's, I'm just going to use a round number, 10 cents per kilowatt hour for you to buy it. When you have extra, it goes to them for 10 cents, and it's great. I have an additional feature because I have hourly billing. Do you have hourly billing?
No, although they do have a different rate in the summer than winter, but that's pretty crude compared to your hourly thing.
Yeah, because ours,
I totally approve of. That's the way it needs to go. Energy has a different value at different times of the day, so we should be paying that.
Ours actually adjusts every 5 minutes.
Wow.
And so it's all based on the current cost and supply and demand, and there's some guardrails so we don't get these $900 kilowatt hours like they had in Texas, because it's regulated, unlike Texas. But so for me, the normal person would pay 12.5 cents kilowatt if they get the flat rate. But on hourly billing, I am able to charge my electric cars overnight at costs that can be fully loaded costs below 6 cents per kilowatt hour.
That's excellent.
And so what that means is that for 6 cents for a kilowatt, if I put 10 kilowatts in my Bolt, Chevy Bolt with a B, Bravo, if I put 10 of those in there, it's going to cost me 60 cents, and I might be able to go 40 miles on 60 cents of energy. And then in the summer afternoons, the price is no longer 6 or even 12. It can go to 18, 20, 24 cents. And guess when the peak production of my panels is?
Right.
In the afternoon.
So they're crediting you on a price,
yes,
on money value.
Yes, they're pricing. So since I have net metering,
that's the way of the future.
Oh my God! So net metering and hourly billing, even though my system was rated for 65% of my usage, and I think it'll be closer to 75% with a few modifications to our usage. This includes 2 electric vehicles, but in the summer, in the middle of the afternoon, when I'm producing huge amounts of electricity and not using anything, and my secret trick for that is we make the house colder than it needs to be overnight, and so we can coast through the afternoon and not use electricity. Anything I produce in excess of what I'm using, they might pay me 20 to 25 cents per kilowatt hour for that.
Really? So you're an energy trader. You're just like the stock market. Buy them low, sell them high.
It's funny because I also have 31 panels, and the first way they suggested it was more panels on the east and less on the west, and I had them flip it. So I have 40% on the east and 60% on the west because the electricity...
It's worth more then.
Yes, that's right.
Yep.
So
that's when they need it the most.
I'm hoping that I will reduce 90 to 100% of the variable cost of my bill there's still some like $15, $20, $30 monthly service connection meter fees that will never go away.
Yeah, I just consider that a tax of living society. Don't even worry about that.
Yeah. I'm hoping to go from $180 to $30 a month on average.
Yeah. So the first thing people need to look at when they're thinking about solar is the deal they can get with their electric company, and if they can get full credit for what they create. So when you make a kilowatt hour, you can get a credit, and it doesn't matter the money. I mean, that's excellent that you can play the money and even do better. But if you make a kilowatt hour, you want one full credit kilowatt hour back, and if you can get that, you should seriously think about solar if you've got some. Because that's a good deal.
The thing you don't want to have happen if your local provider does not allow net metering, any excess electricity you produce is wasted. From your perspective,
well, it'll
go to them.
It's still called net metering. It's net metering where you get a wholesale rate for what you create.
Yeah, and that may be
they'll give you
a buzzkill.
They'll give you like a half a credit for what you make.
So
that's what you want to
check
avoid.
with your local utility provider. And I had 3 bids, and it just turned out that the first bid was the bestest and nicest. And it's so funny because when I call somebody to do a bid, I said, ask any questions you want, measure whatever you want, visit the house, take your time, talk to me and find out what I want, what you can provide. Let's look at our options. But when you give me a price, I'm not going to fucking haggle. I'm going to get 3 quotes. So give me your best price. And the first guy played along. We had a great time. The third guy gave me a nosebleed kind of price. I mean, it was just insane. It's like they didn't want the business. And then he threw out the classic, we'll take $7,000 off if you sign the contract in the next 24 hours.
High pressure.
And he's like, what do you think of that? And I said, I think I can't buy from you. And he's like, what does that mean? I said, I told you before, I didn't want to make this into a game. And the very fact that you padded the rate by $10,000 and then you're going to give me a $7,000 deal, only if I do this within a certain time frame, I'm disinterested because I can't respond.
Yeah.
I don't want to respond under pressure. I want to think about it.
Yeah.
And so you're out. And he was not happy.
Yep.
Like, I told you up front. Yeah.
Yeah. As with anything else, there's shysters out there. So it's the Wild West, and it's taken off, and people are excited. I was just talking to my mom today. She said she gets calls all the time, cold calls, people trying to sell her solar.
Wow.
So what I ended up paying for my system, if I had gone with people before this, I could have paid twice as much for it. That's how much the prices vary.
Wow.
So you got to shop around and use your noggin. And what you want to do is see what your price per watt installed is. So you take the number of kilowatt hour system you're getting, let's say it's 10,000, and you take the money they're going to charge you, let's say it's 20,000, and you divide the money. So you divide $20,000 by 10,000 kilowatt hours, and that's $2 per watt
installed.
Which
that's high,
right, for the whole system.
Yeah,
that's high. I think mine was $1.61
a few years ago.
Beat that by a bit. 3.5 years ago now.
Yeah, because I know you were delightfully surprised for me that the bid that I got. Now this included rebates from the state of Illinois, federal incentives.
Yes,
but my cost was below $1.30 per kilowatt, and you might be able to even get down to $1, particularly if you live farther south.
Yeah, I don't know. Although, I've had people tell me that I think it was Oklahoma. They got quoted. It was like $4.50 per kilowatt.
Oh, Jesus!
Hour. So yeah, they went like $90,000 for some big system.
Pay attention.
Like I say, it's Wild West out there.
So
shop around.
Yeah, I was out net $13,000, and like I said, based on the savings I expect, I hope to save maybe $1,800, $2,000 a year. So 6, 7, 8 years, the system will pay for itself, and I'll still own the system. And I did some research about real estate values that often you get a little, not a whole lot, but you get a little bit more because some people will look at that and go, ooh, solar panels, I won't have an electric bill. And they might pay you $5 or $10 or $15,000 more for your house.
Oh, yeah, definitely a plus.
So that's pretty cool. Now, your Prius Prime, we're going to go over some vocabulary. It is in a category called PHEV. What does that mean?
Plug-in hybrid electric vehicle.
Okay. And so a plug-in hybrid electric... Right? You're right. You nailed it. I should have warned you in advance.
I never use that term.
But people will see it. But it generally means that you can plug the car in, but it's also still a hybrid. And so often, or almost always, I guess always, because that's why they have this name, it will be able to run on electricity only sometimes, and then on gasoline, either gasoline only or gasoline and electric back and forth. And so it has two systems in it, kind of working together.
Yeah, it's like two cars in one. I'm thinking I normally get 250,000 miles out of my cars. I'm wondering if I can get that much on the gas engine and that much on the electric. Probably not.
I think so, because we have now owned 6 or 7 Priuses as a family.
Wow.
Me You're and my wife and the 2 kids, because we about 200,000 miles we gifted our 10-year-old Priuses to our kids, and we bought newer Priuses, and they got maybe 10, 11, 12, 13 years. Both of those cars went over 200,000 miles, and both of them, you may find this awesome, and I bet you have the same experience. We never did brake work. Yeah. That blows people's mind.
I sold mine at 202 and with original brakes. He finally did them at 150, at 250.
Oh my God, yeah, because we were sitting around with the first 2 that we had. We had like a 5 and a 6, and at some point I'm like, wait a minute, honey, we have over 100,000 miles on each of these cars. We've never done the brakes. That's a problem. Because I'm used to the old days, where 30, 40,000 miles, you're flirting with your life if you don't have your brakes fixed. Mm-hmm. And so at 100,000, we went to the dealership, which I normally don't do, but we went to the dealership. And if anyone would find a way to collect money out of me when I didn't need to, they showed me the brakes and they're like half worn. Come back at 200,000 miles and we'll look again. And I was like, what? How does that happen? How do you not use your brakes?
Well, let me a little tip I just learned too. There are some people having issues with these newer primes now, where they're so good at avoiding using the brakes, they use
rust.
the gen down to a lower speed. Yeah. That if you're in a rainy area and stuff, after a rain or something, you should do a hard braking and try to engage the brakes, because some people are going in with they're rusted out because they never got used.
I agree with you. We'll come back to why they last so long, but you're absolutely right. On my electric cars, every few months I'll go out on an isolated road and try to brake as hard as I can without the tires shredding rubber, because if you lock up the wheels and they slide, you're no longer using the brakes aren't grinding anymore. They clutched. I guess that's not the right word. They grabbed. So if you don't use the brakes, you do have the risk of either the pads, the shoes, the drums, or the springs getting rusted and needing to be flat out replaced, even though they have all the wear on them. But why do they last so long, Darrel?
Why do they last so long? Because they're not being used 95% of the time.
That's
why
the
pads, which usually what wears out.
Yeah.
They're just not getting used, because to slow the vehicle down, it's using the electric motor as a generator to charge your batteries.
Excellent. We call that regenerative braking. And just like the way I explain it to people, if you have a ceiling fan and it turns one way, think of that as that fan spinning is moving your car forward. And a lot of ceiling fans have a switch, which you may not be able to reach while it's spinning, but if you pull that chain and change the direction, the motor will slow down the fan and end up pushing it the other direction. And that's kind of how the regenerative magnetic brakes work, where you're not actually using the physical brakes sometimes at all, because gradual, conservative, reasonable driving and reasonable braking, the brake pads and the drums don't actually engage, and the car uses the electric motor in reverse to slow down the car. Isn't that cool?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And where does that energy go? Goes
right there in that lithium where you need it.
Yeah, it goes back in the battery. And of course, that's the thing. The other thing that's weird is electric cars or hybrid cars often have higher miles per gallon in the city, unlike a gasoline car.
Because lower speeds. And I like how I get like 70 miles to the gallon even when the motor kicks on.
Yeah, you're more efficient. On
the back roads.
On our Prius Prime, because we took a lot of longer trips where the battery gets used up, and then it just becomes a very efficient small engine, which, pros and cons, it's a small engine, so, you get what you get. But our average was like 56, 58 miles per gallon in our car, which compared to the average car of 25 to 30 is amazing. And the other term, let's see if you can do this one, BEV. What is a BEV?
Battery electric vehicle.
Oh, you're 100%, Darrel. And did you say that was next on your list?
Yeah. I went with this one because I already had a Prius before and I liked it.
Yeah.
And there's another little advantage there's a couple advantages to the plug-in ones. I mean, I have a much smaller battery to carry around with me all the time. So since I do mostly short trips, I'm doing 85% of my driving in EV mode and doing that with a tiny battery. That's really, 8 kilowatts. It's like 10% of the size of a battery in a Tesla.
Absolutely.
So a lot less weight to be carrying around.
Now, I have the Chevy Bolt, which unfortunately sounds like the Volt with a V, which is no longer made, but the Bolt with a B, Bravo. And its battery pack is 66 kilowatt hours. And they didn't leave much buffer, which has led to a few cars catching on fire. So I love it when people point out, they go, battery cars catch on fire. Like, yeah, I've never seen a gasoline-powered car on fire.
Yeah. Not that much of an issue.
Yeah, it's a very small percentage, and of course they get better and better all the time. But my car, because it's small and relatively light, like many other battery cars, I get about 4 miles per kilowatt hour, which is amazing. The amount of energy to light a 100-watt light bulb for 10 hours, that amount of energy gives me 4 miles in distance. That's pretty cool.
Yep. So, 1 hour, I'm getting, of course, I take a hit in the winter, but my overall average is closer to 5. Because in the summer, in spring and fall, I'm getting 5.5.
Yeah,
because 6.
Because the Prius, like you said, because it has
the back roads.
It has a lighter battery, and it's a really economic. Isn't it 133 miles MPGe for that car?
Yes.
The
133.
The Bolt, I think, is around 120, so it's not quite as efficient, and it's probably simply due to the weight.
Yeah, and the Prius wind factor is like the best too. It's the drag it's a little shorter maybe.
Yeah, the drag coefficient's pretty low. The other thing that people need to know about 100% electric cars, and you mentioned it in the Prius Prime, the effect is small, but it's there. But when you're 100% battery, when you drive faster, you have more wind resistance. You don't get as far per kilowatt. So you need to keep that in mind. If you go up a hill, a mountain, just like a gasoline car, it takes a little more power to do it. But the real big shocker for me, and I knew it was coming, but the decrease in range when it's extremely cold. And if it's extremely cold and you want to be warm and you turn on the heat, in my Bolt, and every electric car is like this, you can lose 30 to 40% of your warm weather range.
Yep.
So
it's amazing how much energy it takes to keep your cabin comfortable. Also in the summer for AC, but with the Prime having the heat pump, it's really efficient.
The heat pumps are great, but in the Bolt and the new car I have, which is why I'm getting rid of my Prius Prime, the RAV4 Prime. At some point when it gets cold enough, it uses a conventional heater, kind of like an element that would heat up the air for a blow dryer, basically, is what it's doing. That takes killer amount of power.
Yes.
So,
yes. And that's another kind of interesting sneaky advantage of the Prime, which I'm not going to have long term because I'll go full electric someday. But when it gets super cold, I just kick on the engine more, because you happen to have this device in there that's highly inefficient. It's gas engine, and how does it lose its efficiency? By throwing away heat. So if it's a super cold day, run your engine more and use that heat to heat your cabin a bit.
Yeah, we have that advantage with the RAV4 Prime. So I don't know. What I'd really like to have is maybe a car that can charge really fast and get 200 miles of range, but then have a small engine with maybe like 4 gallons of fuel that I could get another 200 or 300, and I could use either more electricity or more gasoline. What do you think?
Use more? Yeah, I suppose you could, if you're going to go to the trouble to. That's kind of what the Volt was doing.
Yeah.
And somehow they just didn't have good efficiency numbers. Once the gas, that's why I avoided the Volt way back, is once the gas kicked on, I think they were getting like 38 miles.
Yeah, it wasn't anything like the Prius, but it was also, it had an advantage, and I'm really kind of bummed that they took this out, because the Volt is technically an electric car, because all the gasoline engine did was make electricity.
Mm-hmm.
So it was
just a generator.
Yeah, it was still an electric car. But there's a lot of things coming out. Have you looked at new models? Have you got your eye on anything, or it's just something you're going to do in the future?
Oh yeah, no, I've always had used vehicles. Actually, buying this new one was a big to do for me. So no, I'll run this thing for years and years and years. My goal is to do what I did with my last one, which is have it pay for itself and save fuel.
Yeah.
My last Prius I went through, and it put like $300 in my pocket. And this one, paying $23,000, it's going to take, 12, 15 years. And if the price of gas goes up, it'll pay for itself quicker. But
absolutely. Before we go, I did want to mention you've written a book, or at least some pamphlets. Is any of that available publicly, or where can we find it?
Oh, yeah, you could go to the FreeThinkers.com website. That was almost 30 years ago now. My book, but it's there, and you can look at if you're into the free thinker stuff.
Excellent.
FreeThinkers.com,
and is it okay if I encourage people to go to friend you at your Facebook page?
Sure.
And that's Darrel, Darrel, Henschell, Henschell. And you can send a friend request and send a note. Just be nice and send a note. And it's good fun, because Darrel is one of the best people ever to provide links and citations and sound arguments. And one of the ones that you and I were talking about with somebody recently, and I don't want to get too much into it, but they were convinced that burning gasoline is more efficient than using electricity. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of debating, and I see a lot of these same talking points over and over and over. So yeah, if you got some questions about solar or efficiency or renewable energy or something, I can help you out with links and information on that. I do have a lot of resources.
Great. Well, Darrel, thank you. It was great to catch up, and thank you for coming and hanging out on the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
You're listening to the Bill Ferguson Show.
All right, you ready to go buy some solar panels now? Hopefully you are. I'm very, very happy. I'm looking at my, where's my March numbers here? Let's see. For the month of March so far, we've had a string of very sunny days here in the Chicago suburbs, which is unusual, I guess, for this time of the year. But right now, I have produced 120% of the electricity that I need in the month of March. I do expect to get considerably more energy per day in April and May and June and July and August and September. What was that, 7 months? So it looks like maybe for 7 months, I might be able to produce more electricity than I use on a given month. But all we need is 4 or 5 days of heavy clouds and rain, and instead of getting 40 plus kilowatt hours per day, I might get 10. So we'll see. It's a learning process. I'm really hoping to get, like Darrel and I talked about, 65, 70, 75% of the energy that I use for the calendar year. And because I've kind of gamed the system, and of course check with your utility provider before you get carried away with any of this stuff, I'm able to have net metering where I can sell back during peak production and then buy electricity at night when I'm not getting anything from the solar panels. And I'm also able to do that based on hourly rates. So I might be able to sell back electricity in the summer when it's the most expensive per hour, which would be totally cool. So I'll keep you posted from time to time on how that works. I do expect in the next episode I will have, finally, I will give to the general public what I have on Patreon already, is a segment about my ideas on the market. I had first thought of just taking that and copying it and dropping it in here, but I think what I'll do is I'll redo it because I don't want to be tied to what I said just 2 months ago. My thoughts may have shifted a little bit, but that's kind of the fun of this, is that there's occasional changes in my thinking. You don't have to follow them. It's just for the purposes of a discussion, of a thought process. Kind of, I hope to help you think about the market in a way that is productive and beneficial. That's the big goal. And of course, talked about during the intro and previous episodes, how to unfuck your portfolio. You want to take emotion out of what you're doing. That is so hard. It's so hard to do, but you have to find a way to do that. I guess you don't have to. I think it's financially beneficial for you to do so. That's all I've really got for this episode. So I will keep you posted on all these fun things that I'm working on. And hopefully I'll see you, or you'll listen to me, I guess, in the next show. But hopefully I'll see you out somewhere at a conference that we can, maybe we can mingle again as humans in the future. Until then, ciao.
But I was born too late to play in the Rolling Stones. I don't know Jimmy Page, I never met Yoko Ono. Standing with a strap, I'm rock and roll's bastard son. Go out, get drunk, get laid, have fun. Don't got $1 million, don't drive a Cadillac. Give me half a chance, cause I'm not dead yet. Not dead yet. Not dead yet. I'm a mad dog fighting with the wall against my back. You better get a bigger gun, I'm not dead yet. I've been machine gun, handgun, hijack, left for dead. Die bomb, napalm, nuclear warheaded. Dropped from a jet plane with no parachute. Shot by a firing squad and raped by a business suit. Dancing on a landmine, one leg left. I can still crawl and I'm not dead yet. Not dead yet. Not dead yet. I'm a mad dog fighting with the wall against my back. You better get a bigger gun, I'm not dead yet. Well, you're bigger, rougher, meaner, tougher, dirtier and uglier and sneakier and trickier. You wanna shoot me with a gun, cut me with a knife. Take your bare hands and rip out my eyes. Kick me in the balls and you bit me in the neck. Well, hit me again, cause I'm not dead yet. Not dead yet. Not dead yet. I'm a mad dog fighting with the wall against my back. You better get a bigger gun, I'm not dead yet. Well, there's a mugger in the alley, there's a sniper in the hall. There's a girl at the bar, wants to get